Well, there we have it. The official introduction mid-sentence while we're talking in the background. Francis West, over to you, sir. This is your live stream.
Thank you so much, Mac. And before I start, I always say thank you to Mac, because if it wasn't for him and his team, this would have never, ever, ever got off the ground. I can promise you that. So if you ever need help with LinkedIn streaming or doing these events, there's only one person to ask. So welcome everybody, and today's our second event that we're doing LinkedIn Live. We do this every first Thursday of the month between 11 and 12. And a lot of people say to me, but Francis, what about the US market? So we'll come back to Daniel in a second. But our plan is to do a second event during the middle of the month, because that way we can, later in the afternoon, so we can capture the US market and other countries as well. But these sessions are recorded. They do go out email. They are streamed everywhere, thanks to Mac. So there's always a way to get this information afterwards. And the whole idea about today is about education. Number one, why is it so important to know about your data that's sitting for sale right now on the dark web? So, and of course, more important, what can you do about it? So we've got expert panels here, people and friends and clients, and our team. Ben is here, and William, also another customer, also a very knowledgeable guy, does a lot of talks on cyber. And so, thank you first of all for everybody's time, for making time to come and share your knowledge. So what is the dark web? Well, my version of the dark web is where you can buy child porn, you can buy AK-47s, you can buy any drug of choice and have it delivered to your house or office this afternoon. And on top of that, you can buy your Zoom password and your LinkedIn password and your other account's password. And that's, of course, is not a problem if you do not ever use the same password for more than one account, because then it's okay. I can only hack into your LinkedIn account. And I think, Mac, we should maybe cover that, because we see a lot of people LinkedIn accounts getting hacked, isn't it? And how? So that's the whole session for today. If you stay to the end, which I'm sure you will, or listen to the end after today, we're going to share a lot of great sites and tips where you can use before you go to sleep to improve your security posture. So the person that's the most furthest away, I'd like to introduce first, Daniel. He was introduced by a very close friend of mine, and he's got some fantastic stories still. And tell him, what time is it over there, Daniel?
Yes, we just passed 5 a.m. in Houston, Texas. And I'm really grateful to be here, Francis. My background is really cyber threat intelligence and cyber exercising. So, knowing what the bad guys do, who they target, why they target them, how they target them, and then also being able to design realistic scenarios to help leadership teams understand those threats experientially.
Great. Well, we're going to come back. Thank you, Daniel. I know we spoke yesterday, so I thought there's no chance you're going to say yes to come and join us. But with the knowledge that's sitting in your head and your experience with interrogation, we need people like you to help fight this battle. So let me pass over to William. There's a £10 fine. We agreed. If you don't go off mute, there's a £10 fine for AppSafe. You're still on mute. Okay, it's gone up to £20 now. Almost. Have you got a problem with your mic?
No, we're good. It's me being a dummy. I apologize. Okay. Hello, welcome everyone. And Francis, just add it to the invoice.
Okay.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm William from Lockdown Cybersecurity. I suppose we look at cyber holistically, and we have a slightly different lens that we apply, because our target market and that most of our audience are finance directors or CFOs, and we are very heavily linked into the role that accountants play and the role that finance and the board plays in overall organizational security. But because of our position and because of how our business operates, we look at cyber across all different layers, and one of those layers is intelligence and what you can actually find out, what is available, and how to do that in a safe way as well, because you don't want to just jump into this. It has to be done with some level of caution and some level of understanding of what you're doing. So I think there's a really interesting area around the dark web and demystifying it for people of what that is. And thank you for inviting me today.
Pleasure, William. We've spoken about this many times. I'm sure you've got lots of stories to share in a minute. Let me pass over to Ben. Ben, welcome. Ben is my right-hand man at Security Aware.
Good morning, Francis. Good morning, everyone. As Francis says, it's my job to keep our customers safe and secure, and I look forward to sharing a few ways in which you can actually use the dark web to keep you safer.
Now you've got me intrigued straight away. I want to hear that first. But before we go back to that, Ben, I'd love to introduce you to Louise. I could introduce her easily, but Ben and I, just to give you a bit of background, did Clubhouse for probably about 2 years through COVID. And every Friday afternoon between 1 and 2, we were helping people with cyber around the world. And we had loads of people. And Louise is always joining us on these sessions, sharing her wisdom. But over to you, Louise.
Thank you, Francis, for that warm introduction. So my name is Louise Richardson, and I am the CEO of a small charity in the north of Scotland. And we deliver health and safety education to children and young people and to the vulnerable in our communities. So one of the elements of that is cyber security, cyber resilience. So I have learned buckets with these interactions. I'm very excited to be here, and we are all here, I guess, so that we can protect all our communities, but particularly our sometimes most vulnerable, which are our younger audiences. So I'm here to help, support, and share maybe some experiences, if we have time, of some of the young people that we work with.
Thank you very much, Louise. I find it fascinating. I've got a 14-year-old son and 2 older kids, and the other day, on that note, Ben and I was asked to do a, like a careers day at a local school here in Hertfordshire. And we were there for 2 hours. And I tell you, both Ben and I were shocked how little the children and the teachers knew about cybersecurity. I thought that, this is not a big problem, but now I can see this is a massive problem. And my view on the world is we need to start educating kids at 5 about cyber risk and problem, and also how to fix it. So last but not least, Mac, you and I go back a long way. So please tell everybody what you do and why you're so good at helping us.
So my name is Mac Laupscher, known as the LinkedIn expert purely because my clients labeled me that after several years of doing LinkedIn, both commercially and one-on-one, from small businesses to large corporates. And Francis and I ironically met at the beginning of the pandemic and hit it off very quickly when we both realized the massive dangers that were facing people as the pandemic hit, moving from corporate safe offices to working from home. And on LinkedIn, we see on a daily basis where people are approached by people to connect. And unfortunately, a lot of people just click accept. And this is where a lot of the reverse engineering happens. You don't have a look at their profile. You don't have a look whether they've posted before, whether they've got activity, how long they've been on, who their previous, other connections are, whether they've got other recommendations, whether they're real recommendations. So it's very easy for people to, unfortunately, step into your world and you not realize that there's a danger. So, conversations like today are really, really important for all business owners. Regardless of how small you are, just because you're not Google doesn't mean you don't need to protect yourself. Even more reason because you've got more to lose. Those big companies have deep pockets, so really important. So that's me in a nutshell, Francis, and look forward to this conversation.
Awesome, thank you, Mac. I just saw there on the comments there that Catherine France is meant to join us today, but for some reason I apologize profusely. She didn't have a link. Catherine, just check your email. I've sent it over shortly, well, a few minutes ago. So you should have it in your inbox, and then please come and join us on the panel. So Daniel, over to you. Please tell us your whole view on the subject, case studies you're dealing with. How do you make this problem go away, if it's even possible?
Yes. So from my perspective, the way I like to describe the dark web is, it's the frontier, right? It's out there where you don't have a mailing address that brings stuff to you. And so what that effectively does is it allows nefarious actors to hide. Once the stuff is out there, if somebody dumps my information that they've stolen and they put it on a reputable website, there's a process to get that stuff taken down, right? And it leverages the fact that, hey, you're a business and it's not a good business idea to host stolen data. And so I can convince you to take that down. The same thing if somebody makes up information about me, and if I can convince this legitimate business it's not legitimate information, they can pull it down. But in the dark web, there's no sheriff. And so once that information is out there, it's really hard to get hold of. And like you were describing, Francis, all sorts of information is there that bad guys use to come after you. So if I wanted to do some research on somebody that I wanted to compromise, the things that I can find on the regular internet is a good start. If I can find your address, if I can find that, it's just information that helps me create either social engineering or that helps me convince somebody else that I know you, right? So that they will tell me additional information. And a lot of that information is found in the dark web. So your personally identifiable information, right? Your social security numbers potentially were stolen in some kind of compromise. And that's where they typically hang out and can be found. Your credit cards, stolen credit cards, you can just buy them for cents, and then use them until they're dead. No guarantees on anything in the dark web.
What you're saying is once your data's in the dark web, there's no way to take it down.
It's pretty much there. And yeah, unless you can find where it's hosted and there's no map, it's going to be there.
Yeah, well, I think we need to come back to that. I'm looking at one of the links we'll share in a minute is all the latest up-to-date stats of the dark web. And one of the things that you've just mentioned, in 2020, hackers exposed social security numbers belonging to 250,000 professionals on the dark web. The source is government technology, but it goes, and obviously they also talk about the surface web only represents 4% of the internet, but I'll go through it and share a lot more of those stats going on. Catherine, welcome. Please introduce yourself. I'm so sorry you didn't see the link. We've also got Kevin. I've also emailed Kevin the link. I did wonder where you were, but it makes sense now because you didn't see the link. What I'll do is I'll shake my head so my ears can slap me away.
Hello, nice to join you all. So yeah, my background is insurance. I write content for insurance businesses, and I've worked with Francis and we've written some stuff together. But obviously a lot of my clients are trying to explain the complexities of cyber insurance to their clients, and also trying to educate their clients on how they can build cyber insurance as just one tiny part of their cyber resilience. And that's a lot of the work I do at the moment. So I'm not a specialist in cyber insurance, but it's something that I come across pretty much every day. And yes, I'm really interested to see what you guys have got to say about it. So thank you for having me.
So do you think that insurance companies, just to put you on the spot, actually really understand the threat of the dark web to the people they insure?
I mean, you'd probably get a range. I think, yeah, there's ones that probably do and ones that don't. I think what they're getting probably, I don't know, better at, is that the right phrase? From talking to some cyber insurance real specialists, is that they have teams of people now who are always looking for their clients' data on the dark web, so they can actually alert their policyholder to the fact that they've had a breach, which they might not realize. So it's there's lots of gaps, I suppose. Cyber insurance is effectively after the event.
Yeah,
It's just designed to make stop a bad situation getting worse. What you need before that is all the risk management and the risk awareness of what your potential, what could potentially happen to you. So yeah, I think when you're talking to specialist insurers, then they're talking about the same kind of things that you're talking about in terms of the dark web. But hearing that once your data's exposed, it's stuck there is scary for everybody.
Did you see, Catherine, a lot of I'm talking about the UK now, so maybe Daniel can tell us from a US perspective, but a lot of these credit agencies like Experian, all these are now offering a service on behalf to monitor your stuff online, which I think is a great idea. And that's the first tip of the day. If you use any of these days, please go and subscribe, because the reason why we live longer is because of early detection. That's my view on the world. So when it comes to cybersecurity, the same logic applies. If you have the right systems, tools, monitoring in place, never mind the training, you just stop being low-hanging fruit. Well, Catherine, thank you. We'll come back to you in a second, because I know you've got lots to share. I'm delighted that Kevin made it. This man is all about data. So we thought, you've got to be here. So please introduce yourself, Kevin, and tell us what you do, and also your view on today's subject.
No, brilliant. I really enjoyed last month's one, and I felt I had to kind of jump in and help from a data protection side to give it a different view. So I'm Kevin. My company's Data Protection in a Box. My background is IT. I've run IT departments for 20 years, and since 2016, I've been a data protection consultant. My company is all about helping smaller SME companies become compliant, without spending shed loads and all the scaremongering involved. We just want to help the smaller companies be honest and pitch it, and you accept your own risk levels. Today, hopefully I can just give you a different point of view from a data protection side rather than the cyber side.
Yeah, far away. I'm really interested to hear, because my question I wrote down as you did your introduction is, so if somebody's data is lost, stolen, depends which way you look at it, are they falling foul of GDPR regulations, number one? And number two, should they be phoning the ICO when the data is sitting on the dark web for sale?
Well, that's the big thing. So at that point, it's you're following your breach process. So you should be looking at what information's out there, reviewing whether you need to report it to the ICO. I can drop a link to the ICO website. It's a nice little tool there that tells you if you need to report to the ICO. And then finally, add it to your breach log, your breach register, which will identify what's been lost, what information's out there, and what you've done to try and reduce the risk of it happening again in the future.
And I think this is a subject that maybe needs a complete separate conversation, and that's all about supply chain. Daniel and I spoke about that a lot. We see that a lot in the UK. People's data getting compromised and they don't even know about it, but they supply bigger companies. So Louise, thank you, Kevin. Let me move over to you, Louise, because you deal with the subject, when it comes to children, and we all know, how important this is. Can you explain to us what you do, what's your view on this? How do we fix this problem, if at all possible, with the children?
I mean, I think we touch sometimes on the tip of the iceberg. So we're at the back end of it, where I see the front end of it. So if we believe that there's an issue with kids, then we can times that by 100. So from sharing information online that's inappropriate, sharing personal information when we look at data. So they're sharing, I don't know, their mother's maiden name. So we do a little trick with them. So we say, if I went on Facebook now, I'd know how old you were because you've got a Leavers hoodie on. If I look back, you're probably on Facebook with your mum, who's probably wished her mum a happy birthday. And that gives you your mother's maiden name, date of birth, happy birthday. And actually, even I'm not an IT expert or or any data protection expert, but actually even something as simple as that can give them enough data to know that somebody's mother's maiden name. I don't want to give people tricks on here, but it's quite easy. And that's the simple worry. The more complex worry is what kids are seeing online, what kids are able to access online, and the images they see from a sense of how they're supposed to behave and look. I call it the Kardashian effect. Other people are available for that, but then that's how we're supposed to look. But also is how we get them to realize their behavior online is real behavior. And I think that's the thing, that's the key. We need to start saying to kids, anything you do online is a real behavior. It's not something that's abstract. It's not something you can be removed from. And as Daniel clearly said, that can be copy and pasted anywhere in any site, but particularly on the dark web. And that will be without their knowledge. And that can be sought, copied, brought up later in their profession, later on in their career. So if you think of all the pictures that were taken when we were kids, and I'm a bit older than some people on here, so the ones by the beach or wherever, I mean, they are now public domain. Kids are being filmed from when they're in youth, in vitro, so they're literally when they're babies. And so I think when we look at what the compact and the impact on young people, it's exponential to what we are thinking about today. Because as Francis clearly saw, and as we see all the time, is young people are not equipped because we're not equipped. So how do we teach our young people how to be equipped with this new digital era if we're not equipped to do it? So we have to keep on stripping it back and going back and finding out where we sit and finding out where they. And interestingly, the investment in education for young people on cyber is usually code writing, or how they get jobs in cyber employment. But actually, the investment in cyber education in terms of how you say safe is pretty low. So I very quickly had a meeting with I'll call it Aberdeen Council the other day, and they were saying, the schools can do it. The schools cannot do this on top of what else they are doing. So it has to be as particular as learning maths and English. So we see time and time again the vulnerability on the scale from I'm not going to change my password, or they don't understand about privacy settings, to how exposed they are to images, but also how exposed they are to not understanding their behaviors are real behavior. And it's quite humbling, but also it's devastating, because you think, how do we keep these kids safe? How do we keep them safe? So that's the conversation that AbSafe go back to time and time again, because we need to get it right, and we need to be talking about and challenging their views on digital access or digital exposure.
So on that note, you know what, Louise, you just reminded me of something. Yesterday morning, I was on one of my security panels that I serve on. It's called the Worshipful Company Information Technologists Security Panel. It's a long sentence. And we were discussing exactly the point that you've just made, or several points. So I think it might be a great idea if you could actually come and join the WCIT and be on this panel, because they are putting a lot of effort into getting funding from government now, especially in the UK, to start educating the teachers and, of course, the kids, because the parents are, unless you've got a young parent, they're also pretty clueless. So thank you. I think we can have a discussion or session purely on child safety when it comes to cybersecurity. Thank you so much, Louise. And so, by the way, Louise is just launching a new page. So, we try and raise funding for AbSafe all the time, because you can hear the work that they do for our kids. It's just phenomenal. William, over to you, please.
I've remembered to unmute this time. Louise, that was really interesting. The only comment I would say is that, unfortunately, my school didn't teach me maths or English particularly well. So I worry about their ability to have taught me cyber on top of that. But I think everything that you're doing is really, really valuable. this is a really interesting area for me. And if you YouTube out Silk Road and you watch the documentary on that incident and that whole area, it is unbelievable. And I suppose that there's a kind of underbelly of piracy, right, that I can remember going back a long time, right? Napster was the first one, I think, where it was all of a sudden I could download something, I could download songs, I'd have to go to our price to buy them, and now I could have them for free, and I could have them all on my computer. And so these were like the precursors for things being available that potentially once had a price that you paid for. And I really like, Daniel, your nefarious kind of marketplace for crime as a description of what that dark web is. And it's a really good one where you can literally, you know, I mean, there's instances of everything. And somebody told me recently that there was a submarine for sale. It was an old decommissioned nuclear submarine from Russia that was for sale on the dark web legitimately, which is absolutely crazy. One of the things that I thought I'd mention as well is that out of the plethora of different stuff you can actually purchase on there, one of them that you can buy is certificates and degrees. You can buy fake certificates and degrees and things that will give you, and actually from a vetting perspective of how we employ, I think this is a really good, because these counterfeits are phenomenally effective. They look incredible. And as a business, we are quite trusting, right? And if somebody has a nice smile, if they talk a good game, if the documentation backs it up, we're probably not going to go to the lengths of due diligence that maybe we should be undertaking, because we're living in a world of increasing AI processes, in abilities to be able to buy things that look very similar to the real thing, but not their counterfeit. So from a business perspective around the employment and vetting, I think it's a really important thing. Intellectual property theft, we saw a number of instances of last year. Nvidia, they had their stuff kind of leaked out. So did EA. It makes me question the value of intellectual property once it is put onto the dark web. Does that impact? And I think it has to. How could it not, right? Because it leads to people pirating that and to doing all kinds of different stuff with that source code. So one of the things that I think of is for a business, when protecting themselves, they have to recognize that actually these leaks are incredibly damaging to the intellectual property that they have if that gets leaked onto it. One of the things that I've seen in the last year or so is data trackers, that people actually can put little trackers into their piles of data. And that way, if their data is exfiltrated, they get an early warning alert of where it's then being seen. And, you know, I mean, there's so many points here that I've written down. I'm not going to have time to go through. Lockbit was really interesting. That's a ransom, you know, crime as a service, essentially. And this is a big mechanism of what the dark web is the ability to communicate and to build relationships with criminal syndicates, with gangs that are looking basically to provide you with their software, and you go off and do it and they take a commission for it. And it was just interesting going back with the children one, Louise, that actually Lockbit posted up this week, and it was a daycare center, and ethics in crime, Lockbit actually apologized and said a public apology for doing this, and said that they can't choose who their affiliates are, but they've removed this particular affiliate and he won't be dealing with them again, which I thought was crazy. One thing I just want to leave with as well is that, you know, we're looking at a dark web solution. We've got partners for this. And one of the really cool things that they've been able to access is actually be able to scrape Telegram, 4chan and 8chan and Discord chats. And these forums, these messaging forums, are being used to discuss machinations of fraud. And this is what it is really, it's cyber fraud. So those mechanisms are really good. So being able to have this early warning where you can see we're being talked about, right? We're being discussed. Some of our data is being breached, and really understanding what that looks like is really important, because you could be at the other end of the scale. You know, there was a large motor dealer got hit before Christmas. They came out publicly and said that no customer data had been taken during this process and that they were doing an investigation. It looked a little bit dubious even when they put the comment out, but one day later, when all their data got breached onto the dark web, it was just completely embarrassing, and also probably lead to a fine because they said everything was fine too early and too presumptuous. So I think, we got to be careful. Some of the other stuff they put on there is sucker lists. So if you've paid a ransom, chances are your business and your name's been put onto a spreadsheet somewhere and it's being sold to other criminals because they know that you're likely to pay up. So that's something to be aware of. So just last bit that I will say is that there might be a temptation here to just download Tor, which you can get now as an extension for Google and Google Chrome, and jump on it and see what's out there in itself. And when you do that, you leave a footprint. So the advice is always to go through a professional body to do this. What they actually do is they take it off the darknet, they scrape those pages, and then they can interrogate them without leaving that footprint. And that's a really important process in protecting yourselves as well. So I would always advise that you can be interested and you can read into it, but actually if you're going to undertake this exercise, work with a professional organization that does this as their day job.
That's brilliant advice, that, William, because I know, again, somebody just posted there, and please go ahead, feel free to start posting any questions that you have that you would like us to answer. But somebody posted here, yes, there are 12 to 16-year-olds who have all the skills required to pull off a hack. That is so true. I mean, there are sites you can go to call ransom as a service. So for $100, not only can you get a ransom attack, you can even get somebody to execute the ransom attack, and they've got a telephone support number. It won't be a very sophisticated attack, but for $100, you can pretty much take out anybody. So before I hand back to Mac and also to Daniel, because there's so much we still need to get. I always watch the time. We've got 29 minutes go, and I see Jill is also on the call. We run through these sessions, and we only do one a month. And there's so much stuff we want to share. But I'm looking at this is 2023 alarming statistics here that I'm reading, and we will share the links in a minute because I gave them all to Mac to share in a short while. That's the techjury.net one, where they say the countries whose population has the largest per capita usage of the worldwide darknet platforms is India. The credit card numbers cost to get credit card numbers, you can buy them for as little as $9 a go. Payment data costs as little as $270 on the dark web. The dark web accounts for roughly 48% of the internet. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You should go and have a look at this link and look at all the latest what's going on there. And I would just want to, before I pass on, I'll just tell you a quick story. This guy phones me up, doctor from Australia the other day. He says, Francis, I've been looking at your posts because we post every day on LinkedIn. So please follow all the speakers on the session today. He says, I got this email through. And I'm really worried. I'm a doctor. I've got loads of patients, and I'm married. I've got 2 children, and I need your help. I said, what's up? He said, yeah, no, I got this email that, they saw me masturbating, and they've got a video of me masturbating in front of my laptop. And I'm like, yeah, been there, done that, seen that before many times. But the guy was really, really worried, because if that got out, you can imagine what that would have done for his whole community and his reputation, really. So I said to him, let's call him John. I said, John, let me tell you that 99.999%, unless you can tell me otherwise, of course, this is a scam. And the reason why this happened is because they bought your data off the dark web. Because we spoke earlier about, I'm sure everybody on the call here today used Zoom. I mean, 500,000 records became for sale, I think last year, the year before now. So if you have a Zoom account, which I'm sure you do, please go and change the password, because I bet you any money, potentially your password is for sale on the dark web. So anyway, coming back to this guy, Shame. So I spent probably about half an hour with him, and we went online. I did some checks. I showed him everything. I told him what to do. And all I can say, you should have seen the relief on that man's face when I told him, don't worry, this is a scam, and this is how it happens. But of course, Ben and I will tell you that, 91% of all attacks came in by email, which of course originates from the dark web. That's now gone to 94%. And I think it's criminal that business owners are still relying on their staff to decide whether this email and this link sitting in the inbox is an attack on the business or personal as well. Anyway, so on that note, Mac.
So, wow. I've got tons of questions popping into my head over here, because I unfortunately, I myself have been on the other end of various different scam attacks, and some that I've noticed early enough to figure out what was going on. But Travis Robinson has asked a question which pretty much is in line with what I was thinking as well. Is what are the simple ways to validate someone's authenticity with little to no knowledge and understanding of the dark web? And as you just said, a lot of companies leave it to their staff to try and figure it out. But these things have become so clever, so complex that what would you say are like the top 3 things to kind of go look at that should raise red flags?
Ben, can we throw that one at you? Oh, another £10, Louise.
There we go. So I think there's a slight delay on my StreamYard. In terms of being able to validate the authenticity, I'm going to refer back to what William said, in that it's having either a company or the right tools that can actually then go on the dark web to use that information to actually help protect us, because the dark web is out there and it's becoming more and more widely known about the extent to which the criminals interact on the dark web, the forums, the selling and the sharing of data. And now, as William said, it's the fact you can actually go and rent or buy malware, access to a machine. You don't have to be a particularly technical person anymore. You can go and get all these resources out there. So it's actually then utilizing a tool, so something like our password manager, Francis, that actually goes and checks the dark web to see if any of the passwords have been leaked in a data breach. You mentioned Zoom, and LinkedIn was another one. It goes back a few years now, but they had millions of their usernames and passwords leaked, and it's then this data is the weapon that's being used against us. So it's our own data that they're then manipulating to actually be able to commit fraud, access our accounts, because they're relying on weak and reused passwords. So they'll find the one that's been leaked and then reuse that across all your different accounts in the hope that it's been reused, because of the amount of passwords that we need to actually retain now. So without having a tool to actually help us do that. And then they've got companies that actually do go out there and investigate what kind of information is out there in terms of company data. So if they've been leaked in compromises, and then you go on to again, I think William kind of stole my thunder on this a bit today. He also mentioned about the intellectual property out there. So it's the different ways, in not just from attacks against people, but attacks against company, in using their own technology against being able to manufacture a product but do it in a different country cheaper, and then actually take that the company with the who had the initial intellectual property goes out of business because it's being mass produced for a lot cheaper in a Middle Eastern country. So it's actually being able to use those tools, use these companies that are out there to actually help keep us more protected by using that, by going, because they can go out there and have a look for that data, and then actually we can use that to prepare ourselves and make sure that we're being as safe as we can possibly be.
Thank you, Ben. I'm watching time here, and I've got so many questions and things I want to share. The first one I always like to share with people when I do my talks is a website called haveibeenpawned.com, and hopefully Mac can put it on the chat. No, he's done already. He's far too. He should have been a twin, Mac. You're far too good for one person. But yeah, so if you go into that website right now, and you were to type in your email address, and I urge you to do the same with your kids and your wife or your partner or your son, mother, or your family and your staff, do a whole session on this and let them see what's currently out there about them, about their email accounts that they didn't even know about. And then, very important, right at the top, there's a section that says notify me, the second menu from the left, where you can then store your email address, and then they'll send you an email. as soon as there's a compromise. So please have a look at that. It's a brilliant site. I've recommended to probably thousands of people so far. I mean, there's many others which I'll share in a minute. But Daniel, I want to come back to you because, I'm very grateful for you getting up so early. What time is it there now? 20 to 6 in the morning. This man has got so much knowledge around simulations and everything else. So when you do your simulations working with businesses, how do they take this whole concept of the dark web and how do you get them to understand it, and of course how to mitigate the risks as a result of their data being leaked? And I've got another question for you at the same time is, do businesses in the US understand the value of their data that's being lost and I'm coming from an angle of M&A. So when the business is being sold, when the valuation is being put onto a business, do the evaluators actually look at what data of the business is currently for sale?
Yeah, so great questions. Two at once. So you're challenging my early morning brain, aren't you? Yeah, I think one of the things on the dark web is it is a treasure trove of information, right? Anything, we like to categorize, there's three types of hackers. There's the hackers that come after you to embarrass you. We call those hacktivists, right? That you've done something to offend them and they want, to embarrass you publicly. So that stuff's probably not going on the dark web, although it's probably also a copy of it on the dark web. The criminals are looking to monetize, right? So what they steal from you, they're selling on the dark web. So that's where it's really a store there. And then the nation state threats or the sponsored actors are, sometimes that's stealing intellectual property to create businesses around that, again, like William said, put you out of business. And so really it depends on where they're coming from. But all of those groups go to the dark web for their tools. They go to the dark web for information that shortcuts getting you compromised, right? So if it's learning, who the people are in your organization or where they go, where they bank, any kind of information like that, where they can send them. I mean, if you get an email from a bank you don't bank with, it's very easy to just dismiss it and go, oh, this isn't me. But if it's your bank saying, hey, there's something going on, you best click this link, it's best not to click the link. Always go, and kind of this also goes to Travis's question, always verify who you're talking to in a way that's not in an email that says you should talk to me, right? You should find, if somebody invites you, and I always like to say, am I already connected to this person, right? And if so, call them on your phone or find some other way to connect with them and say, hey, I just got an invite from you. Is that you? Again, any kind of double checks that you have in your policy and procedure, is a good way to just put slow the process down, think through it. And as far as mergers and acquisition data, if I were going to buy a company, I absolutely would, again, not go into the dark web because everything you click there is a trap, right? I mean, if you think the regular internet is not safe, the dark web is really, I mean, it's absolutely, everybody wants to take advantage of people there. So where somebody should be scraping for that information, right? Am I buying a company whose information is already available out there in the dark web? Then I'm not probably getting the intellectual property I think I am.
Yeah, very well answered. Thank you very much there, Daniel. There was another question I was going to ask you, but now, of course, that's escaped me completely.
You mentioned exercises, and the one thing I'll say about exercises are it gives businesses an opportunity to think through these puzzles, these things that we're talking about that don't come up every day, right? If it's not in your periphery, you can't really think through, well, what would I do if somebody threatened me, my family, my business, and just having somebody who's knowledgeable walk you through a realistic scenario will open up that awareness and help you. I mean, I personally think, letting your kids sleep with their cell phone in the room is as dangerous as letting them sleep with a loaded gun in their room. You really need to know, and control as much of the danger as you can.
Yeah, no, precisely. Thank you, Daniel. I see Lawrence Perry, who actually is a top man who introduced me into Clubhouse First Places Online. Lawrence, unfortunately, I'd love to have you on the panel, but because we're limited, I'll get you onto the next session, I promise. Then you can share your wisdom. But thank you for being on the session today. Talking about the dark net, I don't know if all of you listen to podcasts, but one of my favorite podcasts is all about the dark net diaries. And I cannot recommend it highly enough. I mean, there's a lot of episodes. I've been listening to it for years now, but there was one disturbing one that I listened to, I think it was January, February time. And it's all about this, I don't even want to describe it, but about children and photos and videos and people using Bitcoin accounts to subscribe. And what the good news for me about all of this bad stuff is that the criminals, including, imagine this, you're a head teacher and you're sitting having your Sunday lunch and the police comes in and they take you away in front of your family, which makes me so happy. But so they were able to track everybody by their Bitcoin accounts. And one by one, they've just taken them all out. All these people that were uploading videos to this child site and, of course, downloading sites. So the fact that you're thinking that you anonymous anymore, in my view, is long gone when you're using your Bitcoin account to pay for stuff on the dark web. So I just want to throw that little flag out there. So, Ben, I'm still intrigued. You said to me earlier that the dark web can be used for good stuff. Hit me, please.
Right. Well, do you know what the dark web was initially created for, Francis?
Tell us.
It was to oh, excuse me. It was to provide a facility and a resource for people that were oppressed to be able to communicate. So it was actually done with good purposes, like most things that we find with technology. We've got cybercrime, and cybercrime now in fact accounts for more crime than all other crime put together. But it's only done off the back of something that's been incredibly powerful and has revolutionised the way we live our lives and do business, i.e., the internet. So the dark web was to be able to provide an encrypted platform for people to actually communicate. So journalists in countries that are covering human rights issues and people that are oppressed and activists. So it was actually to provide them with a resource in which they could get out to the outside world. But of course, there are always going to be people that then take advantage of that and then use it to their nefarious purposes, and that's how we now know of the dark web. But it was actually done for good and for reasons that had a positive benefit for people. But no, when I was saying about using the dark web to keep us safe, it's knowing that it's out there, Francis. So we can't change that. The data is out there. The dark web is out there. The criminals, we know they're using these resources on the dark web. So it's how we can then use that to be better prepared to keep ourselves safe. Hence, using the password manager that goes and checks your passwords. Hence, using a company that will go and check for resources on the web that might be referring to your company data. And then that way we can be better warned and better armed against the attackers. So we're using their own resources against them.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. No, I know about it. It's a pity that it's obviously moved to the way it has. And that's why, we're here today to help people and to educate people. William, I've got a question for you about ChatGPT.
Oh, right.
How is that working with the dark web? And
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, it's really good. Ben, first of all, I love your bit there around it was used for communication. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? That's the saying. So it's quite applicable. You know, it dawned on me earlier when I was thinking that I think people think these are really new developments, and this is something that's happened in the last few years because it's exploded and it's the terminology is becoming better known. People understand the data or have heard of it. People watch shows like Mr. Robot and they watch things in the Darknet Diaries that you just signposted. But actually, you know, Morse code machine by Marcotti in 1903 was hacked. That was the start. And ransomware was created in 1989. These aren't new tools, right? It's actually reasonably mature, and these tools aren't that inaccessible. There are a number of different sophisticated attacks, and there are a number of ones that are not as sophisticated as you think, which goes back into the point that younger people can be using them. ChatGPT is a really interesting one. I saw it had a breach yesterday. I thought that was I could see that coming because people are throwing business documents into it and asking them to summarize them. They're highly confidential and sensitive, and for some people are just thinking we're too busy, right? We're too busy as workers. We've got too many plates to spin, so let's a computer do it for us and do the hard yards, and then we'll just review it. It sounds a brilliant idea, doesn't it? And we spoke about this previously, but in reality, actually, if you're throwing all your confidential information into their data farms or data servers and they get breached, you're losing all of your confidential information. The ability of AI and OpenAI is still not fully understood, and it's still experimental, I think, in many ways. But you know, what it does do poses a massive threat, whether you're asking it to write malicious code, whether you're asking it of which resources you can find out information on the internet. And usually you have to pose the question if I didn't want to find this information, where would I? You have to spin the question. But you know what it can be used for. Well, let me put it like this, right? These organizations and people that do this work are doing it every single day, right? It's a full-time job for them. And like anything that you do over and over and you research and it's practice and repetition, you get quite good at it. And so these people are really doing intelligence. They're doing reconnaissance on you as an individual. They're using your things like social media to build up a profile of your character and your personality. They're looking at company hierarchies. They're getting access via cloud accounts, right? Somebody's email, and then they're understanding the flow and the patterns and processes that you undertake, especially around financial payments or controls. So actually, they're doing a huge amount of intelligence on you before you hit. Most ransomware just goes into a discovery mode before it launches, right? Because it wants to understand your processes. So I think you have to flip it. When we talk about intelligence and doing counterintelligence and using these resources to understand and unpick how we're being targeted, why we're being targeted, what their process is, that's really, really valuable, because at the other end, they're doing loads of intelligence on you. They're finding out when your IT director's in the air so they can launch an attack because they know that you're going to panic stations, right? So we really have to better understand the mindset. And going back just to finish on the one about OpenAI, well, you know, one of the things that we always had was this concept of look at the language, look at the grammar, review it, how close it is to the actual person. But if you're feeding in information and intelligence into these platforms and saying, this is the person, this is how they write their emails, this is how they phrase things, write an email in this style, asking for this, then all of a sudden you've almost got a perfect replica of how to then launch that's going to have value. And I think that's the big thing, is that actually we often thought we can trust what we see and we smell and we hear, but now we can't, right? We're going into days where actually we can't just believe everything that we see. Our senses can be tricked by technology. So this is going to play a bigger part, I think, in the dark web. I don't know which direction it's going to go and how it's going to swell and expand and propagate, but I think that we just have to be really, really aware, especially with this new waves of technology, that there's so many more convincing ways that we can be hit.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's I think we only right here of the tip of the iceberg. We only smelling the coffee. So this is why we do what we do. We love it, the fact that we can protect small businesses or single, even home users with enterprise level protection all day long. we've only got 5 minutes left, and we've still got to close properly. So, Mac, are there any other? I knew you've got loads of questions for us, but so
I tell you what,
whoever answers the questions, please answer them quickly. Yeah,
I tell you what, there's so many questions. I think there are going to be so many more of these interviews and these lives, and what I would suggest people do is get involved, and when you see these events posted, go and put your comments and your questions there so we can address those much more in a much more streamlined fashion on here, because a lot of the times there's so much information that to pick it all out, it's much easier if you can just get your questions. And Francis, I want to throw a spanner in the works just for future conversations, but I don't know if anybody has recently watched the docu-series on the news about the Milton Group. This is where organizations that were scam companies had set up multiple companies, all of the same type, actually sponsored major football teams around the world, and then ran investment tracking software that people thought was safe to go and use because the company sponsors the football team, so it must be safe. But in the meantime, one of the biggest scams pulled off in recent history. So I think maybe an interesting conversation in the future as well.
It's funny you should say that, because I was thinking about our topic for next month, and I think it has to be online fraud. And how many directions. Again, last week we dealt with a lady, Shane, and she was crying on the phone, and she's banking with one of these online banks, and this could be we need about 3 hours to discuss this topic, but she lost 50,000, and she runs a small a restaurant in Margate, and the bank said, tough, you press the pay now button. But if it was, and this is a little warning flag again for everybody, if you're using a well-known bank like Barclays, NatWest and all the others, your chance of getting your money back, it's much higher than using one of these free online banks, which is great, but I would think twice. You get what you pay for. So we have 3 minutes. Kevin, you haven't spoken.
Hi guys.
You have spoken, but you normally speak a lot more.
Yeah, I know. I normally do, don't I? No, it's great to hear the stories. It's fantastic out there. Just on the online scams, Scam Interceptors, BBC, great program. It was on this week, and it's so dynamic. Someone was applying for a loan online, and the breach happened straight away when they got declined for the loan, straight off to the dark web. Someone picked it up within minutes and sent a text message to the person that got declined for a loan. And at that point, they scammed them. So well worth a watch. I'll jump on that. It's on the BBC, on BBC Catch Up or whatever it is. Another one, just a quick one about the Chat GPT. Completely with you, William. Fantastic information. Witnessed this week where someone from a well-known car manufacturer was having problems with the programming for the system. Put it into Chat GPT. It kindly fixed the programming for him. But now the programming is freely available in Chat GPT for any other car manufacturers. It's so dangerous. It's so fast paced. We got to be on it.
We can do a talk just on that. You should ask Ben.
Final piece for me: if it's out there, it's out there. You're not going to get it back. It's gone. Everyone can get it.
So thank you, Kevin. We've got 1 minute left. Can I first of all thank everybody who's taken the time to, number one, come and listen. Number two, to take part in the panel. If you would like to take part in the panel in future, just send us an email. francis.w@security-everywhere.com, and again, please follow the people that's on the session today, because they're all unique in what they do and the value they bring to people. So can I ask everybody with your final comment, as we've got 1 minute left, just to leave people with it, one tip. Daniel, start with you, and then Louise, and then Ben, Kevin, William.
Yeah, for me, really, when it comes to the dark web, you just have to realize that everything you put out there, whether it's in Chat GPT or whether it's unprotected stuff that you let somebody touch, is there forever. You're not gonna get it back. I think It's a fantastic point.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Ben. What's your leading tip for everybody today? No, I think you're having fun with your.
Yeah, it won't unmute, Francis. So I'm.
Yeah.
I can go next if you want.
Yeah, you go back then, Louise. Ben is having problems with his technology today.
So every behavior you do online is a real behavior. That's what I want people to remember. Every time you click a button, every time you make a comment, every time you show your face, it's a real behavior. It's a real thing.
Brilliant. Catherine.
I think my top tip would be, is like I said earlier, is to incorporate cyber insurance into an overall approach to things. I think that my top tip would be, and I think this is a shift I'm seeing in the insurance industry, is you carry out due diligence on everybody you work with. Traditionally, you'd go to company's house, you'd check their accounts, you'd check their records. Now you need to be doing the same with their cyber security and actually doing the same level of due diligence. And I think there's going to be a real shift towards that. And I think that's vital, because every time you share your information or you work with a third party, you're spreading that risk. And I think having the skill to kind of identify all those processes and taking action would be what I think people need to look at now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Catherine. Short but sweet. William?
Yeah, to reiterate Kevin's there, once the horse is bolted, it's gone. But you can use the dark web as a mechanism to understand when people are planning to attack you. And that is a brilliant early warning sign. And just because I loved one of the comments in the chat that if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably OpenAI.
Yeah. Mac?
Wow, I think there's been so much value over here. For me, the key thing is don't just click. That's the just take a breath before you click, because more often than not, had you taken that breath, you would have noticed something was not right. So that's my tip for today. Francis, over to you.
Thank you. I'll end with listen. I didn't miss anybody out. Is this a lot of people get done through invoice fraud, or what we call whaling, and especially whether it's business owners or whether it's parents or whether it's business partners. And my tip of the day is anything to do with finance, big transactions. The way to stop anybody from getting that money from you or doing a transaction that over email or text is go and stand in the middle of a rugby or football field and agree a 10-character word, because that will be 0 up to 9 or 1 up to 0, whichever one you want to go. And then whenever you are challenged with, whatever happens, say, I would like you to give me the 3rd and the 5th and the 7th, obviously not that one. And then if somebody can't give you that information, whether it's a child, a husband, a partner, or business colleague, then you know you're dealing with a scammer. It's that simple to fix this problem. And on that note, I wish you a lovely day. Yeah.
One more thing. I know Kevin was just about to go and give his final tip before we finish off as well.
Okay, go for it, Kevin.
Sorry, just following on from Catherine's, completely, it's due diligence and put in place documents and policies and procedures before it happens. It's not a case of if, it's when.
Marvelous. Thank you, Kevin. Apologies for that. So remember, we're doing this every Thursday, at least the first Thursday of every month between 11 and 12 p.m. And we will do another session during the middle of the month for people abroad. But thank you for listening. Thank you for your time, and always be very safe.
Cheers, everybody.